Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 2, Episode 13, according to the order I'm using. Hearth-warming Eve. This is the retelling of their version of Christmas and why it became part of the world, and it's mostly about the actual world building and mythos of My Little Pony in general. By the way, I found something that indicates that apparently this is the 13th in production order, but 11th in aired order. So apparently I was right and also wrong about that. Going back. Terrible episode. I got nothing to talk about. So who wants some Oreos? I still got this thing of Oreos here. Check it out. You don't want... Okay. So, for real though. I really like this episode. Like a lot. This is actually probably among my favorite episodes so far. Marshmallow flavored adventures. Now that being said, this episode, we have to discuss the bad first. And that is that this episode definitely ended on a wah-wah. Like, any disagreements here? Because, holy crap. They even, like, start arguing, and then there's the Wendigo, woo, and then, I'll close it, ha 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 ha. Yeah, no, come on, guys. So, go ahead and up that one. Excuse me. That being said, I also want to add a continuity counter for the Star Swirl the Bearded thing. He's going to be a recurring element until he finally shows up. So, they enter Canterlot. Everyone's super excited. God, I remember what it felt like to be like that excited about something. They start playing I Spy, except they play it really terribly. That's not how you play I Spy. I have played I Spy within the last, about 3 years at this point, with my niece. You're supposed to, like, give a clue, not say, I spy Sean in chat. No, you're supposed to say, I spy someone with purple text, you know, and it's that person. No, it's whatever. I do also have to find the argument about the window and the cold weather just a little bit interesting. Interesting foreshadowing. I also want to say, before we dive into the meat of the episode, I actually really like this particular approach to storytelling. It's actually something that television doesn't do all that often, even though television is primed for this. Basically, it's a story within a story played by our regular characters. Now, that's relevant because, A, it means that even though this is actually the story of complete strangers, we are still watching our beloved regulars. Ergo, we get to still enjoy the characters that we care about, and thus we have automatic investment. In chat, people were debating, for example, how much of the personality was them and how much of the personality was the main six. I think most of the personality was the main six. It was their way of presenting the roles, and we, as of this moment, we have no idea what the original actors, that is to say the actual characters, were like. Because we are watching, you know, Twilight Princess playing, I forget her name, Twilight Sparkle, and, you know, Rainbow Dash playing Commander Hurricane. There we go, there's one I know. So we are effectively watching Rainbow Dash playing a role. Thus, the more the focus is on the Rainbow Dash thing. It's a good move. It's a good move, and it allows for automatic investment in new characters and coloration of events. And I like that. Voyager kind of did that with Workforce, Part 1 and 2. It's a similar concept, to use another parallel for this. Anyways, it also periodically... The other thing they did, which was important, was they showed the events of the past as if that's the episode we're watching, rather than the episode they're watching. They showed the play a few times, and that's key to show the framing device. But they also primarily showed the actual events. The easiest example of that I can think of is actually Princess Bride, where we don't sit there and watch the whole show of him just reading the events out loud to him. We actually watch the events happen, right? Good framing device. I like it. Good narrative stuff. Also, Spike as a narrator was awesome. I think we can all agree on this. Spike is awesome, at least in this one. So, let's dive into the world building here, shall we? First of all, one of the interesting little tidbits I liked was that all three groups of ponies are portrayed as being miserable. They accept that they have to rely on each other to exist, but there's no actual, to use this show's terminology, there's no actual harmony. It's more like, well, if I was to use a parallel, it's kind of like how we pay taxes in modern society. I know that sounds like a strange parallel, but hear me out. It's not like you want to pay taxes, right? It's not like you're thinking, oh yes, this is something that is a good thing, that I am, that is a part that I believe in firmly. Like, how many of you, if you had the choice, if someone offered you the choice, would just decide to stop paying taxes? And I have to raise my hand on that for reasons I've discussed before. And I'm saying that as someone who actually believes in the concept of taxes and legitimately feels that it can be a good thing if properly used. Do you still get the benefit of the people paying taxes? I have no idea. You don't know either. You just have the choice to stop paying taxes. Would you be exempt from services? Okay, you're taking this too far. The point is, you don't want to pay taxes. To use a counterexample, to make my point a little bit clearer, how many of you have ever gone to like a family dinner potluck kind of a thing? Or even like an office potluck? Or a tailgate? Anybody ever been to a tailgate? In all of the scenarios I just mentioned, the way it works is everyone brings a piece, right? Everyone shows up and brings something. So, I'll bring the food, I'll bring a dish of like chocolate, fudge or whatever. And you'll bring the carrots, and then you'll bring the whatever. It's a deliberate effort to try and share, rather than this is something that's being taken from me because I have no choice. You tolerate paying taxes, and this is funny, you guys are actually making my point for me. You tolerate paying taxes not because you want to or because you choose to, but because A, you'll be imprisoned if you don't, and B, well, but I need these things that you provide, which taxes theoretically provide. I also imagine several of you don't live in the United States, where tax money is squandered and burnt like, I don't have a good analogy, like leaves in a fire. I don't know how it is in other countries, but here, yeah, my taxes don't pay for jack over here. Anyways, so point being, the way they're being portrayed, to finally bring this back to My Little Pony for a second, the idea here is that initially they put up with it because, they don't have a choice. And there's no one threatening to imprison them, but they kind of need that food, so fine, we'll take care of the weather, that way we can get food. And fine, we'll give you food so we can have decent weather. And fine, we need the sun and the moon, so we'll give you food. There's no actual harmony. There's no teamwork. There's no cooperation. There's no pattern. And I actually really like how they portray that. It's especially interesting because what we're seeing is a very logical... Yes, I sacrificed the unicorns. What we have is actually a very logical setup, if you think about it. It is goods in exchange for services. Arguably there's services involved in it, but my point is the Pegasi and the unicorns both provide services, and in exchange for those services they gain goods. You have an economic market system. It's very threadbare, but it's there, being built into this. So that's actually really cool. I like that. We also see... Now, the episode does as good of a job as it can here, because they only have 2 examples of each type of pony. But we see a reasonable and an exaggeration of each type of pony, if you're paying attention. Exactly, Sean. There's actually a term for that kind of triad of power, balance of power situation. I can't think of it, but there is a term for that. Because the whole idea is, if 2 ever gained up on 1, you would have an imbalance. So instead, all 3 have to maintain it. Anyways, so we see the exaggerations. Earth ponies are stupid peasants, and Pegasi are stupid brutes, and unicorns are stupid, uppity royal snobs. But we also see that despite, Twilight, of course, being a perfect example of the unicorn who is not stupid, basically. And we see Fluttershy, the example of the one who is not stupid. And Applejack, who is not stupid. And you'll notice the only real modifier that is added to any of them is the removal of the word stupid. Because Applejack is still uncouth, as she's portrayed. Fluttershy is still someone who is, an airhead, and the Twilight Sparkle is still portrayed as someone who is a bit aristocratic. But not all of them are portrayed in a far more positive light. Now, what's interesting, Lord Harrimont asked a very important question. I actually looked into this. Apparently there's a literal book, which I need to buy someday. What was it called? Journal of the Two Sisters. I actually need to buy this book. It apparently contains a fairly large amount of background lore. And it includes answers to that exact same question. I don't remember what the answer is. I'm just going to put this in my... It's $10. I'm going to put that in my thing right now. There we go. Boop. Anyways, it's it apparently has a lot of background lore for stuff like this. And it mentions something about, I forget if it's like the sisters came after. Like, I feel like the Triad gave rulership of the area to Celestia and Luna, and then Discord showed up and took it from them, and then they fought back to that, and blah, 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 blah. But anyways, I forget the exact order of things, but the point is the sisters are not here yet. Frickin' unicorns. We must kill the unicorns. Anyways, love that kind of world building, love the kind of establishment, because it shows, it's a good thing, it's a good message to show for kids and for adults both, that even if you are part of an archetype, that doesn't make it a good or a bad thing. Even if you are a stereotype, that is not a good or a bad thing. It is specifically what you are that makes you good or bad, like so many other things. Right? And I'd like to use a direct example, if I may. I imagine most people watching this right now, including me, are fans of My Little Pony. And I bet most of you can already think of bad examples of fans of My Little Pony and good examples of fans of My Little Pony right now. So, the archetype isn't the good or bad thing. And I do like how they show that. Moving on. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Rusker. That is true for every fandom. It's just a thing. Star Wars fans, Doctor Who fans, Sonic the Hedgehog fans, Formula One fans, soccer fans. You name it. Mechanics. MySQL fans. It's all over the place. So, yeah, Star Trek fans. Well, that's been true for a while. So they go to the new land. They all try to come together, and they fail miserably, and this horrible winter showing up. And we see these random horse-looking things in the clouds, which was a nice moment, I think. Because you'll notice, if you're paying attention, they're just shown there, no explanation. They're just blowing this horrible wind, and then it moves on as if they weren't there. They're actually portrayed in the style that you would normally portray a horror movie monster. And I like how they use the Wendigos like that. I'll talk more about the Wendigos later. I have some thoughts about that. But first I want to talk about how they get to Equestria. They abandon wherever they were. They all migrate to Equestria. And you'll notice Equestria, first of all, looks absolutely gorgeous. You'll notice that the first shot we see of Equestria has gems visible on the surface. Now, first of all, we've already talked about the gem thing several times. And the more I see, the more I'm starting to think that the idea that gems grow here is actually the idea that gems generate over time within the area that Equestria is, or at the very this specific spot of it, something like that. But more to the point, I like the representation of that because there are areas in real life history where surveyors or conquerors have shown up in new areas, and they have been like, "Oh my God!" Like, what? There's gold just on the surface. In fact, mining. This is going to sound like the geekiest thing I've ever said. But if you ever study the history and development of the technology of mining, it's fascinating in its own way because it initially started out as basically how to get stuff off of things that are basically, I keep saying the word basically. It started off as a way to gather resources from the surface, from things you could literally see just looking at it. But then, of course, they ran out of that, so they had to start digging down. And then that went dry, and so they had to start really digging down. And bit by bit, the technology developed as they had to go further and further and further into, into the earth, and this mining technology had to improve. Because you can't actually just dig up. I cannot go out to my backyard with a shovel and dig up gold. But at a certain point in history, in the very area I live in, I could have actually done that. And I know that's a weird parallel, but I love that idea here. Because if you're paying attention, gems still aren't actually on the surface for the most part in most of the show, except around Ponyville. So it seems like they have, done the surface mining in the last, millennia. Yeah, exactly, Loner. It really is fascinating. Funnily enough, Weirdamoth, if I could respond to that really quick. Weirdamoth says, I never watched the show before, didn't realize how good it was overall. I was in the exact same boat. I started watching this show because my niece was interested in it, and I was doing my due diligence as, an uncle and as a guardian in order to make sure that she was watching something that was good. And then I started watching it, and I was like, this is actually a good show. But I was surprised. It's like, wow. Okay, sure, whatever. But yeah, we'll talk more about the gem thing when we get to Maud, because she does absolutely add to that. So then, we see all three of them in the new land, and first of all, I could see my future house from here. That joke got me, I'll admit it. But second of all, we see that all three of them value something, which is, kind of awesome within the area, for them specifically. We have nice, clean, beautiful air. We have... we have gems, lots and lots and lots of gems. Already talked about that. And then we have really, really fertile soil. Something that all three groups would value. So naturally, that leads to conflict. Anybody who's been watching my show for a long time knows that I have a concept I call line theory. And it's actually a rather extensive and long-standing theory that I've been building over the for the last couple of decades, I've been working on this theory. And I mean that sincerely. The short answer is line, everything on this side of the line is good, everything on that side of the line is bad. That's the summary. But one of the ways I have exemplified this is how it is human nature to be elitist. It is. We all can fight against it, and I know several people do, try not to be elitist, but it is our tendency to lean in that direction, to try and group things into us and them, and to put us above them. That is human nature. One of the ways I like to exemplify that is if that we were a bunch of cavemen in a cave, there would be people insisting that that my rock is so much better than your rocks. I mean, look at it. You can just tell by looking at this is my rock. Well, no, your rock isn't. Oh, my rock is totally superior. Check it out. And I had that thought in mind when I was watching this episode, because it then cuts to them in the cave arguing over a rock. And I know it's not quite one-to-one, but what they're showing is basically line theory and elitism mentality in a nutshell. And I found that very amusing. Because that is actually how we are. Yeah, they literally draw lines in the cave. They literally draw lines in the cave. And I was just thinking like, wow. And I mean, how many of you have played Dragon Age? Or Mass Effect? How many of you watched Battlestar Galactica? How many of you seen any of the Aliens films? All of these have the same problem. And the same thing that just makes us go, ah! There's this big, horrible death doom, and we're arguing amongst ourselves. Right? Stuff like this is why I roll my eyes when people say that this is just a dumb kids show. Yeah, I know, and Dragon Age Origins is just a dumb video game. Come on, dude. So they're literally at the point where they see these frickin' death dooms, and they're literally being frozen. There is a scene where they are literally being frozen over as they are continuing to argue, and it's like, you suck, I hate you. That is like the most on-the-nose metaphor I've ever seen for that, and yet it's so true. That's actually how that works. And again, a lot of fiction does that exact same thing. Yeah, for the Horde! Thank you, World of Warcraft. There's another one. Someone just stabbed a giant sword into the planet, but you know what? I really hate those human guys. And yeah, Babylon 5, that's another example of this. It is an extremely common trope. And with good reason. So they finally... Don't go around the rock, go over it. That rock is clearly unicornian. Ah. So they, where was I? They finally name-dropped the Wendigos. This is the third time they've shown up. They name-dropped the Wendigos. This is also when they name-dropped Star Swirl the Bearded. Nice continuity. I want to talk about the Wendigos because I think they're one of the most fascinating things MLP has introduced to its mythos, its backstory, its world building. I had to modify my theory about these guys a little bit, but I think the Wendigos are the opposite of harmony. Now, technically what I mean by that is stagnation, but that's actually not what I mean, because stagnation doesn't get across what I mean. What I think they represent, if I was to use a real-life term, is entropy. Heat death. I think that Wendigos literally are the representation of entropy within the setting. So you can see how that's not quite stagnation, but it also kind of gets across the idea, and I've had this idea for a long time, that harmony, which again is a literal, tangible thing within this setting, creates a bubble. And I think that bubble basically pushes back that stagnation, that entropy that is constantly encroaching elsewise. This is also something that'll come up when we get to the Crystal Empire at the end of the season, because that kind of covers that as well. And why an equinship? Because it's called My Little Pony, not My Little Entropy, Ethel. I don't know, dude. I don't think entropy is an aspect of chaos. No, absolutely not. I think it's a completely separate thing from everything. We actually will see, to my knowledge, off the top of my head from memory, 2 more subscriptions from Vic Rattlehead. Thank you very, very much for the sub. Very much obliged, sir. Thank you. Listen, Lord Harrimont. Stab! Okay, there we go. Now that that's dealt with. If you happen to know where you'd like to put that as far as increasing priority, please let me know, Vic Rattlehead. And sorry for the noise. I didn't mean to smack my hand there as loud as I did. Right in front of the mic. I apologize. My point is, the Wendigos are clearly portrayed as something that is, for lack of a better way to put it, a more natural state of the world. The way things should be if there was no independent, intelligent life trying to change it into something better. In real life, for example, the natural state of planet Earth is not something that is really amenable to our existence as people, as civilization, as society. Now, obviously a balance needs to be maintained, because if we completely destroy the planet we're on, then we have issues. But my point is that, civilization is not the natural state of the world. Cities are actually extremely unnatural. Like, if you actually sit back, I'm sure some of you know this even better than I do. I've only done the bare bones of looking into this. But a city, the very concept of a city, is so against the natural order in almost every level. But that's fine. That's what I would consider to be a good thing. This, I get across this idea. This is, I'm sorry, if I could segue for one other thing. This also comes up in Star Wars. In the AU, the new Disney stuff, one of the common elements that keeps coming up is that the Force is the natural order, and that's not necessarily a good thing. This kind of ties into one of the old EU ideas that you can be too light side. Because in the AU, if you are too light side, you are too natural. You are too, passive and just kind of going along with the flow, even if it's actually a bad thing, even if it involves the death of thousands and blah, 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 right? It's the same general concept. And this is why I look at the Wendigos as basically the something of a more natural state of the world they're on. Yeah, nature isn't nice. That's a good way to put it. Unfortunately, I haven't played Greedfall, Vic Rattlehead, although I think it's getting towards the top of the priority list right now. I don't have the list in front of me, please forgive me, but it is something that a lot of people have shown interest in me playing. Wait, it plays like Witcher 2? Uh-oh. I'm automatically gonna hate it. So, I'm kidding. Hopefully. I hope. I heard a lot of praise for it, so we'll see. Then again, I heard a lot of praise for Disco Elysium, too. Although that was a good game, so whatever. I feel like the Wendigos are also... So you'll notice the unicorn magic by itself is helpless. against the Wendigos. And you'll notice that Wendigos themselves eat disharmony. Like, they are drawn to it and grow stronger from disharmony. This is why I called them the opposite of harmonic, Lord Harrimont, is because they literally are something that grows stronger and more powerful in a state of disharmony. Now, this is also why I differentiate the Wendigos from, say, Discord. Now, that's kind of getting into in future stuff, but you'll notice Discord does not literally get stronger in a state of disharmony. In fact, Discord, as we will see, himself fits into the harmonic pattern. He is, however, a force of chaos, which is not the same as disharmony, which I know sounds weird, but you can see demonstrable evidence of this fact throughout the course of the series. This is funny because the very word Discord literally means a lack of harmony, but let's not get into the English of it. Pretty sure they didn't think that through when they first made it. Yeah, entropy is extremely orderly. That's why I originally was calling this stagnation, because everything being a lifeless ball of frozen rock is basically entropy, right? You know, all the heat energy, all the molecular movement removed from a galaxy or a universe or whatever. What you have is a frozen nothing. So yeah, chaos being a natural a part of the balance of the universe makes sense, because that's true in real life, isn't it? I mean, we're getting into some deep stuff here. Please forgive me, but whatever. It's the episode's fault, not mine. Don't look at me. If this was an episode of Star Trek that did this, I would do the exact same thing. And I love, by the way, while we're on the subject, that's a good way to put that, fire or just heat in general, Baron. One of the things I love about the way they show the Wendigos is like a really, they're a really well-designed monster villain, horror movie monster. I know, right, Ethel? Because of the fact that they are incredibly easy to defeat if you can actually do it. All you need to do is be harmonic, to actually have harmony with each other. The catch is, you can't fake that. You can't just say, oh no, I totally like this guy. You have to actually have it. It has to be real. Thus, their greatest strength is, at the exact same time, their greatest weakness. Yeah, actually, Dementors was exactly the parallel I was going to make, Baron. Because Dementors are actually very powerful and very weak on the exact same axis. If you can actually have the kind of positive, good feelings and thoughts, and then summon that into a Patronus, then a Dementor is completely powerless before you. If you can't, then you're screwed. Right? Similar concept. Not the exact same equation, but similar concept. I like this kind of thing. I agree, Lord Harrimont. This is very MLP. A monster you can only defeat by not being assholes. Yep. Giggle at the ghosties. Anyways, I'm sorry. I think this is actually one of our longest episodes here. I'm looking at my time. Yeah, we've been talking for a while here. But like I said, I really love the world building of this episode. They've been doing world building this whole time across most of the 2 seasons, but I like I like this episode because it really gives me something to sink my teeth into, not just about the society or the culture or the people or whatever, but because of the very nature of how the world works. I love that kind of world building. I love digging into the grit of why harmony works and why it's a good thing. Blah 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 blah. First of all, I'm glad you're liking Farscape, because Farscape is amazing. Deep Space Nine takes a while to really get its footing, which is true for all of Star Trek, really. I would say Season 3 is when DS9 actually gets good. That's just my opinion. So I don't blame you for putting it down. In my opinion, I already gave the taxes thing act, and I'm sure you heard me yammer on about that entirely too long. But in my opinion, this is pure headcanon. I would say that the 3 tribes were effectively in a state of disharmony, but in a less severe thing. A snowball effect, for lack of a better way to put it, was happening. I think that the Wendigos were a recent problem only because of the fact that it got to critical mass. And then once it hit critical mass, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. The lack of food problem probably didn't hurt or didn't help. You'll notice that the way they portray it, though, this was a winter, like the first winter that this has happened. So, you know, but I'm getting off topic. I like to think that there was a lot of infighting and a lot of, I don't want to call it conflict, but that is the word I want to use. Like I would bet money that each of the three tribes actually was in open conflict with one of the others at least one point in history, and only pulled back because they basically had to. I would bet money that the unicorns tried to enforce rule upon the earth ponies and were basically pushed back because of the Pegasi. I would bet money that the Pegasi tried to conquer, you know, one of the other two factions and were pushed back by the third. You know, that whole uneasy balance thing that I was talking about earlier. I also personally find it interesting to think that I love the idea that the tribes were disharmonious within themselves too. That's true, Weods. They just abandoned this winter wasteland, you're right. And that I'm pretty sure that will actually come up later, but that's getting into theory crafting, and I'll leave that for later. I love the idea that the earth ponies would fight amongst themselves. You notice food is a recurrent element as an aspect of political power, which makes perfect sense to me. This is the Realm of the Darkness from Kingdom Hearts 0.2. That's my job, Vic Rattle. I wouldn't have agreed to talk about this show if I didn't think there was lore to talk about. And if people didn't pay me to, but, you know, whatever. If you guys paid me to talk about a show that had low lore, I'd probably say no. Because it would be like a 2-minute episode. It's like, okay, so... like Looney Tunes. I couldn't talk about Looney Tunes. Okay, so... he says, "What's up, Doc?" And then he gets shot, which is indicative of how Elmer Fudd's a moron. Then Elmer Fudd falls head over heels for Bugs Bunny in a drag, which shows how Elmer Fudd's a moron, and then that's the end of the episode. Like, I could do a Rumination or a Streamination series on Looney Tunes. I would love that too, Lord Harrimont, in all sincerity. I would love to dig into why is the leader of the Earth Ponies elected, whereas the leader of the Unicorns is a inherited title. Now, the parallels are obvious, but I mean, like, actually dig into the historical in-universe reason why that is. Maybe there used to be Earth Pony warlords. Remember, strength is one of the things that Earth Ponies have, magically induced strength. And that, I mean, you can't tell me that an Earth Pony war wouldn't be devastating as hell. And I love the idea that they basically, you know, each other until it got to the point where they were like, okay, we can't do this anymore. And they basically founded, you know, a republic or some kind of democratic organization because they kind of had to. I haven't actually seen Picard yet, Vic Rattle, so I can't even comment on it. I mean, I'm not paying for CBS All Access. War is expensive. Yeah, no, I mean, considering, again, that food is a big deal, I would actually like the idea that if the Earth Pony War was settled because the other two got involved, because they had to, because they had no food. Like, they were naturally drawn into the war because the source of food effectively dried up. And think about the damage they're doing to the terrain. And, of course, this is talking about... and, yeah, that's possible, a peasant republic. That's a good parallel. And, of course, the Unicorn War, if we're going to go into that as a concept. Like, the Pegasi War, actually, funnily enough, would probably be the bloodiest. What's the name? There's a TOS episode. One moment, please. I gotta find it. Taste of Armageddon. Season 1, Episode 23. For those of you not familiar with the episode or the name, there's a planet which is at war with another planet. And the war it's an entirely clean war. It's been going on for generations. And there's just a computer. And the computer says, this attack has happened, therefore these people are now dead. And it's all simulated, but they actually have the people die. And they do this. It's actually a really good episode, by the way. I highly recommend it. But they do this specifically to remove most of the material cost of the war. However, one of the points of the episode, and that Kirk himself makes this point, is that simply by doing this action, by removing the cost of war, war became more acceptable. Thus, Pegasi, they of course would cause a lot of collateral damage to the other two, but not to themselves. They don't give a damn about the weather, not really. They are literally above it. So I think the Pegasi War would be the bloodiest war because the material cost of war, would be the lowest. Unicorn War would probably be the shortest. That would be the quickest, okay, we gotta stop this kind of a moment, right? Like, as we've seen, there are intelligent members of the factions, so the Unicorn War would have died down relatively quickly. The Earth War would have probably dragged on for a little bit longer, but I like to think the Pegasi Wars have been going substantially longer. Because, again, all that really it affects is the weather, which may or may not actually have an impact on those below. And again, you'll notice how all three of these conflicts could only really be solved by the other factions getting involved, leading back to the triangle thing we already talked about, and the balance of power problem, and the taxes status quo. You give us food, we'll take care of the weather, we won't kill each other. You give us food, we'll take care of, the magical stuff, the sun and the moon, we won't kill each other. You take care of the weather and the magical stuff. We'll give you food. We'll take care of each other. We won't kill each other. I would love to sink my teeth into that as a writer. That's also very true, Act. Although I don't think we really have numbers on who was the more prolific, but shrug. Actually, yes, I absolutely think that Weirder Moth. We've already speculated on the nature of how weather is an artificial construct in this setting, except for a few specific spots of magical energy. So yeah, I actually think that winter doesn't form naturally. Like, the reason they have to do winter wrap-up and crafting winter is because they have so much harmony that, the natural winter can't come in. You'll notice that, again, to parallel to the Crystal Empire in the north, that'll happen at the end of the season, that area has no winter within its borders. Like, it's actually warm and balmy and comfortable within its borders. And it's a snowy wasteland right outside it. Basically, yes, Baron. That is my headcanon, is that the world used to be pretty messed up, and it has adjusted to this point. By the way, I know I'm going to bring this up later too, but I also personally have always thought, and I don't know if anything has ever confirmed or denied this, that the Crystal Empire is basically up in the frozen area they abandoned in this episode. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. There are Wendigos up there. It is frozen in hellscape. And they have basically put down a containment dome around it in order to make it livable. So, anyways, I've probably talked too much about this. Yes, yaks smash. Yaks are also too prideful to ask for help, which is a thing we'll talk about later. And for some reason, they treat that as a good thing. Anyways. Well, there might be a lot of gems. They do call it the Crystal Empire for a reason. They probably just abandoned a lot of stuff. I'm going to go and chop off this one.